What's up with the Gunk? Should you play it or should you skip it? Just how close were we to an Xbox version of the Wii? What does Game Pass mean for the future of owning games, and when can we expect a Gears of War 6? Let's discuss. So the Gunk is a new Xbox exclusive that made its way onto Game Pass on December 16th. It's made from the creators of the SteamWorld series, Image and Form Studios, and I've talked about it a little bit on this channel before. When I first saw it, it just seemed like a game that wouldn't be on Xbox. Platformers and Xbox, those are two things that you just don't usually associate with each other. So the Gunk follows the story of two space explorers, Ronnie and Bex. They're clearly in some sort of financial distress. They make multiple references to the fact that they've racked up a bunch of space debt, whatever that means. And while they're on their space travels, they pick up an interesting energy reading on this planet that is seemingly deserted, and they land on the planet hoping to find the sources of that energy and sell it and get rich. Soon after landing, you learn that something that is only referred to as the Gunk, which is this black, gelatinous, gooey, ugly, messy substance, is sort of sucking the life out of this planet and the surrounding wildlife. And more importantly, it's suppressing the energy reading that you came for. So it is your job to clean up the Gunk and explore this new planet and hopefully get rich. I keep going back and forth on if the actual game mechanic of sucking up the Gunk with your glove is fun or not. It's undeniably, the end result is very, very satisfying. Like I said, once you're done cleaning it all up, it opens up the world for further exploration. In that way, very satisfying, very fulfilling. It's, got a little bit of platforming, you clean up the Gunk, and then there's some puzzle solving that you gotta do in order to traverse through certain areas and things like that. There's a crafting element as well, where you gather metals, organic materials, fibers to give yourself upgrades. That is to your glove that you have that you use to suck up the Gunk, and you can also suit it up to shoot out plasma cannons. You can upgrade yourself to give the ability to sprint and all sorts of other things. None of it is particularly revolutionary, and I think the reviews overall reflect that. It's not the most amazing game that you will ever play, but it was definitely a nice change of pace for me, someone who had just been sweating it out in Halo day in, day out. It was kind of a nice, relaxing experience. It's short, so you can make your way through it pretty quickly. And the gaming mechanics were solid, and the story itself was just interesting enough to make me want to keep going. I already liked the premise a lot. The two main characters, Ronnie and Bex, those two explorers, they complement each other very well. And Bex is the pilot of the ship, and she's more of a pragmatic person. She just is in it for the money. She wants to get the energy, get the money, and then settle all their debts and kind of ride off in the sunset. Whereas Ronnie, the person you actually have control over and is actually cleaning up the Gunk, she's more of a wide-eyed optimist. She is all about exploring. You kind of see the game through her eyes, like, wow, this planet is so beautiful. This planet is so interesting. I want to see more of it. I want to learn more about it. Whereas Bex is like, come on, Ronnie, just clean up the Gunk and let's go. So I thought that was a very interesting dynamic, very charming, and the more you learn about the world, the more that you want to keep going. But there wasn't anything really revolutionary. A solid 7 out of 10, I would say, and I think most of the reviews are kind of reflecting about that. Nothing amazing, nothing crazy, but a solid game overall. I also think it's cool that Xbox Game Studios has a game like this under their umbrella. Like I said, platformers, Xbox, you don't really associate those two things together, and this is a very interesting step in diversifying their overall offerings on Game Pass. So the Xbox News podcast reported that the Coalition is working on 2 new projects. Now the Coalition we talked a little bit about before on this channel. They're the studio behind the Gears of War franchise, and they recently worked on optimizing the Matrix demo that showcases Unreal 5 engine on the current gen Xbox consoles. And according to Corden, one of those projects is Gears of War 6, which shouldn't be expected to come out until 2024 to 2025. I know, very long time considering that Gears of War 5 came out in 2019, but we've got a little bit of insight on that. So one, we know that they're working on another project that's not Gears of War related. It is a new IP, so that's very, very interesting, very mysterious. We know it's going to be a smaller project. It's not going to be based on Unreal Engine 5. Doesn't mean it's not going to be fun, just going to be a little bit smaller on the scale. Now that smaller IP, whatever it turns out to be, is expected to release a little bit earlier, sometime in 2023. Gears of War 6, on the other hand, that's a pretty long way away. 2024, 2025, that might as well be like 10 years from now, for all I know. But apparently the reason for that is that they are officially making the switch, the coalition, to working with Unreal Engine 5. And working with an entirely new engine, that's gonna take a lot of time to get used to for their employees, for their developers. They did say in May of 2021 that they were moving on to work with Unreal Engine 5, so we can only assume that that's gonna carry over to Gears of War 6. And Gears of War 6 is going to be on Unreal Engine 5, and that, just thinking about it now, seeing what they've done with the Matrix demo, it's gonna be crazy. I mean, Gears of War is already known for having these shocking, epic, dramatic sequences, and having those elevated to this new engine is just gonna be like mind-blowing. The official blog for the developer noted, shifting to a new engine is a big undertaking, so we want to be clear that we will not be announcing any new projects or titles for some time. So with that quote, we can probably assume for fans that it's probably gonna be a hot minute until we get any news, let alone a release date for Gears of War 6. Gears of War is a franchise that I sort of fell off on. I played 1 through 3, and I didn't play any of the other titles, so maybe it's time to revisit these titles, and before this comes out, I will definitely have time to play through all of them since it's being put off until 2024, 2025 at least. Now, Halo Infinite has been out for a couple of weeks now, the multiplayer and the campaign now. While people are having a lot of fun with it, me included, as you can see, I have the HCS Raleigh kickoff right behind me. It hasn't avoided criticism entirely, obviously. One of those criticisms is that people who bought a physical copy have noted that it's pretty much useless, right? It's pretty much just like a installation setup, because you plug in the disc and you still need an internet connection to download a bigger file for the campaign and the multiplayer, making the physical copy like, what is this for? If I have to connect to the internet anyway to download the actual game, when I have apparently the actual game right here in my hands with this physical disc, what's up with that? Now, this isn't a new issue that just started with Halo Infinite. This is something that has been happening to multiple physical copies of games, but it is interesting because Xbox, with the introduction of Game Pass, presents an interesting issue in terms of owning physical games and owning digital games. I feel like a lot of people are not buying games on Xbox as much anymore, right? Because of Game Pass, because it's such a great deal. 10, 15 bucks, you get access to all of their first-party games and a whole lot of other third-party games. Now, there is an argument, and there's a very famous Sarah Bond presentation where she lays out that Xbox Game Pass users spend more individually than people who are not subscribed to Game Pass. I don't know the full logistics of that, but I would bet $100 right now saying that if you have Game Pass, chances are you're not buying a whole lot of games for Xbox, unless they are not on Game Pass, right? For example, my friend of mine picked up Far Cry 6, not a game that's on Game Pass, right? Tales of Arise, I just picked up, not on Game Pass. So things that are not on Game Pass, I will buy, but if I don't have to, then I'm not going to. Now, this brings up an interesting issue on ownership of games. We already know that ownership of physical copies, physical disc copies of any game are going down because you could just download them right now. No need to go to the store, no need to wait in line, and there's some, pros and cons to that, right? First of all, you don't have to load up on all of these discs and have them sit somewhere in a box in your attic or something, right? But on the other hand, you kind of miss out on like the used game discs that come out to be a lot cheaper. So pros and cons, right? And we know that Xbox has been doing a really good job in preserving your physical copies, right? They've done a whole lot of work on the backwards compatibility front, making sure a lot of your titles you can just plug into your Xbox Series X, your current gen consoles, even if it's from the OG Xbox era, the Xbox 360 era, Xbox One. They have done a good job of preserving those games. Like I said, for example, I can take a copy of Max Payne, put it into my Xbox Series X, and it will work. On the other end, though, having these games that require an internet connection, having these games that are tied to Game Pass and Xbox Live and things like that, what does that mean for the future, right? What does it mean when Game Pass eventually shuts down? Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon, obviously, because that's their whole marquee service right now. That's their big offering. But we know it eventually could happen. For example, they just shut down the Xbox 360 servers for Halo 3. There's no guarantee, no matter how popular something is right now, that it's not going to go offline in the future. And what does that mean for people like me who just own a bunch of games through Game Pass? It means that I'm not going to own them anymore, right? Straight up, I'm not. Even if you have, for example, the physical copy of Halo Infinite, does that mean in 10, 15, 20 years that you're still going to be able to play it? Because as we know now, that physical copy is pretty much useless. You got to connect to the server, you got to download the campaign, you got to do all that stuff. That disc means nothing. So what does it mean? I am not particularly sure, and that's not something that's pressing, obviously. Game Pass is definitely not going to shut down tomorrow, next week, next year. They've done a really admirable job of preserving the titles that you bought 10, 15 years ago for the OG Xbox and the 360, but how are they going to transfer that to preserving the titles that are coming out today? Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, but there is a really interesting Xbox documentary examining all 20 years of Xbox's history and the ups and downs that have gone along with that. It covered a little bit of when the Wii came out. So in episode 5, it's called Power On, the Story of Xbox. In episode 5, they kind of briefly examine motion sensor technology, and they cover the Wii. Now, if you're a little too young to remember what it was like when the Wii launched, it was just crazy. That's all I could really say. People were crazy hyped for the Wii and the nunchuck controllers. And it really was revolutionary at the time, because at the time it was the Xbox 360 and the PS3. And these consoles, the whole point of it was, look at this new fancy hardware that'll take gaming to the next level. The graphics are going to be amazing. Technologically, they're a wonder. And Nintendo was like, we're not going to do any of that. We don't care about graphics. We don't care about these big fancy open worlds. We're just going to take a fun idea and we're going to run with it. And it sold a lot of freaking consoles. And it was just awesome because it made gaming accessible to everyone, right? So you didn't have to mess around with learning a bunch of combos for a fighting game, button mashing on your controller, or kind of picking up the move with the left analog stick, look with the right analog stick. You know, I feel like a lot of people, if you didn't grow up with that, it's kind of disorienting for you. For example, my wife, she can't play any first-person games because she gets motion sickness. And here you had a game, the Wii, or a console, the Wii, that was something that everyone could pick up and enjoy instantly. Your dad could pick it up, your grandma could pick it up, and you could start playing Wii Sports or Just Dance or anything like that. It was fun. I actually had a Wii before I had an Xbox 360, and there were times when it was super fun, like I said. For example, Wii Sports. I think we all loved Wii Sports. Zelda Twilight Princess, great game. But there were times when the motion control, nunchuck controller, the novelty wore off very quickly. For example, I don't know if you remember this game called Red Steel. Red Steel was a game, it was basically a shooter. You had a gun and you had a sword, and you can use your controllers to kind of take your sword and like bat away bullets, and then you switch and you shoot with the other controller. When the concept, I was like, whoa, it was kind of like Super Hot before Super Hot, you know, but when it launched, the game was terribly reviewed, it bombed, and was very forgettable overall. So yes, so the Wii, there were times, amazing, this new motion control madness, it really, really worked. And then there were other times I was like, it got old pretty quickly. Either way, the Wii was a huge success, and that had its competitors looking like, dang, why didn't we get in on this? Motion controls, that's so genius. Why didn't we do that? Phil Spencer reflects on this in the documentary and says Bill Gates himself put a ton of pressure on us to respond in some way to the Wii's success. Nintendo came out of left field with a device that wasn't based on technology. It was based on a simple entertainment experience of being able to play a game without being a button masher on a controller. Clearly, they expanded the audience and they took gaming to mainstream entertainment. So with the success of the Wii, Bill Gates was like, yo, what's up? How can we respond to this? We don't really know. We don't really want to rip off entirely the Nintendo controller, the motion sensor bar, things like that. But they had been working on motion sensor technology. It just wasn't the controller. And that work turned out to be the Kinect. And now you can say whatever you want about the Kinect. I know on the Xbox One generation it fell out of favor, but at the time when they came out with the Kinect, it was a massive success. In 60 days it had sold over 10 million units, which is insane. The Kinect, logically, like I said, say what you want, but it was the next step in the evolution of motion sensor technology. You weren't just tied to your controllers, it was your whole body. It was a full body experience, which is something that people are still clearly interested in because VR has taken off, and that is, like I said, a whole body experience. You know, there were some mistakes with that Xbox One generation, but I thought it was cool, man. I thought it was cool. And I'm glad that we had the Wii to thank for giving us a cool product for the time. The whole motion sensor technology craze has kind of tapered off. You saw it a little bit with the PlayStation. They had that controller that was just like, had a big light bulb on it. Like, I forget what it was called. I never actually owned one, but I always thought they looked silly. And then PlayStation, of course, had their own VR, which was really, really awesome. You kind of see now that we're a little bit over. We kind of left that to the VR realm, whereas the consoles, really, there is some traces on the Nintendo Switch of that motion sensor technology. For example, on Breath of the Wild, which I've been playing through, you can take your two Joy-Cons and you can pull them back when you're firing a bow. That's pretty cool. But it seems that even Nintendo has kind of gone, they put that somewhat in their games, the motion sensor technology, but it's more of a traditional console experience, a traditional handheld experience. So they kind of brought it back a little bit, took what was great about the Wii, merged it into a modern console. But overall, like I said, the whole motion sensor craze is, I would say, on the downswing. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Ray once again. I'd very much appreciate it if you went on over to Twitter and followed me at StayXboxReady. I'm also doing my first giveaway. I'm giving away an Xbox Series X console. More instructions on how to enter for your chance to win coming soon. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks again for tuning in.